starting off this countdown, we have Tommy Taffy. So in the episode titled Freaky Fred, Muriel's cousin Fred pays them a visit. However, this episode starts to take a dark turn when we learn that Fred has an obsession with shaving people's hair. Now, Fred bears some interesting resemblances to the creepypasta creature Tommy Taffy. So, Tommy Taffy is said to come into families' homes and terrorize them. You have to do as Tommy says or else you will face the consequences. Let's address the similarities. Both Tommy and Fred have golden hair, light eyes, and both have a huge smile. Both Tommy and Fred show up unexpectedly at people's houses and end up torturing the individuals for pleasure. So, people believe that Fred was based on the character Tommy Taffy, or that he in fact is a version of Tommy, or maybe even Tommy's brother. Either way, both those characters look terrifying with their wide smiles. Coming in at number 9, we have Hell. So this show is said to take place in the middle of nowhere. Shots of the Baggs' house show that they live completely isolated from the others in a desert-like environment. But yet they are still greeted by multiple paranormal monster-type creatures. Well, people theorize that this is because they are actually in a hell-type underworld. The theory continues by making connections to Greek mythology. Eustace resembles Hades, and Muriel resembles Persephone. Now, Courage is supposed to resemble Cerberus, the three-headed dog that guards the gate to the underworld. Although Courage isn't brave like Cerberus, he does protect his house from all sorts of things. He is also seen to shapeshift his head into other objects when he's trying to warn Muriel. Therefore, he technically does have multiple heads. In our 8th spot, we have the real-life villains. So, there's no denying that this show has some pretty terrifying villains. What's even more terrifying is that people theorize that some of these villains symbolize real-life people. For example, the character Fred is a predator and the character Katz is a serial killer. Then you have the character The Perfectionist that teaches Courage how to be perfect, and gets mad whenever he does something that's not perfect according to her standards. So, she is said to suffer from OCD, where everything needs to be perfect. Then you have Eustace and Muriel, who are a couple in an abusive relationship. And lastly, you have the cruel veterinarian character. In the show, this character sent Courage's parents to space, and he tries to do the same to Courage. He is said to resemble Sergei Korolev, a Russian rocket engineer who experimented by sending dogs into space. But then you have some funnier ones, like how King Ramses is a neighbor that Eustace borrowed something from and then he didn't give it back. So in the episode he keeps saying, "Return the slab," aka return my hedge trimmer, or whatever he borrowed. Moving on to number 7, we have the lost son theory. So this theory basically states that Eustace and Muriel once were parents to a little boy named Jensen. Now, Eustace was so happy to have a son since he wanted a little mini version of himself. However, when Jensen was 6 months old, a wild animal stole him from his crib. Turns out he was stolen by the Cajun fox, who needed a baby to add to his Cajun baby stew. The Cajun fox in this series is known to cook and eat humans. In the episode Cajun Granny Stew, he tries to kidnap Muriel to use her as an ingredient in his stew. Then, when Muriel saw Courage all alone in the alleyway, she felt that he could fill their empty void and act as a replacement for their lost child. But Eustace wasn't happy with this idea, which is why he's always grouchy and refers to him as the stupid dog. In our 6th spot, we have the abusive owner. Okay, so Eustace isn't the nicest towards Courage. He is verbally abusive to him, constantly yelling at him and calling him a stupid dog. Well, this theory believes that Courage is actually a little boy and Eustace is his father. Eustace constantly calls him a stupid dog to make him feel worthless, so he suffers from low self-esteem and just imagines himself as a dog. This also explains why he is constantly afraid. It's years of abuse that has caused him to develop severe anxiety. The only one that truly loves him is his mom. He thinks others will harm him like his father does. That's why when Courage sees other individuals, he suffers from anxiety attacks. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the puppets. So during the finale of season 1, Eustace and Muriel were turned into puppets while Courage was controlling them. Well, people believe that for the following episodes, they remained in their puppet form and never turned back into humans. They theorize that Courage continued to act out his life with them. Everything that happened since that episode was all inside his head. He couldn't deal with the loss of his owners, so he pretends that they are still alive by puppeteering them. In our 4th spot, we have the lost episode. Now, there are so many shows that people claim to have a lost episode, and Courage the Cowardly Dog is no stranger to this phenomena. So people have created a theory saying that there are multiple lost episodes out there that are much darker and gorier. Let me describe one of the episodes. So they claim that this episode starts with static before it eventually shows Courage wearing a mask while rocking in a chair. He then drags Eustace and Muriel to the basement and chains them to the wall. He begins to torture them while they beg and cry for him to stop. Then he ties ropes around their necks and strangles them to death. The episode ends with him back in the rocking chair just staring at the camera with a large grin on his face for 2 minutes straight. Creepy. Moving on to number 3, we have the theory that Courage is a real dog. So dogs are said to be a man's best friend. They are typically very loyal and will protect their owners at any cost. Like, you hear stories of dogs getting lost and then traveling miles to find their way back home to their owner. So what if that's kind of the case for Courage? He's just a regular dog that is trying to protect his owners from any threat. However, the threats he sees aren't real. Let me explain. So Courage was abandoned as a puppy. That right there can leave any dog traumatized and scared of the world. As a result, he sees all other humans besides his owners as monsters. This explains why Muriel and Eustace aren't bothered by the monsters. In addition, in the opening sequence for every episode, Courage sees his shadow and imagines it as some scary monster. Then at the end of the opening, Eustace yells at him and says, "Stupid dog, you made me look bad." After he says that, his head morphs into a green monster. So this means that whenever someone is angry, he views them as a monster. Another instance is in the episode The Quilt Club. In this episode, Courage is afraid of the Stitch sisters, 2 conjoined sisters. But Muriel isn't. Well, that's because in reality, they are just twin sisters, and again, Courage regards them as monsters. So the whole show is from the dog's point of view, who is just so traumatized from his past that he imagines everything is scary and out to get him. In our second spot, we have the true story. Alright, if you weren't already creeped out, you will be now. Turns out that this show may be loosely based on a true story. So this show takes place in the middle of nowhere. Turns out there is a house in New Mexico that bears a striking resemblance to the house in the show. If that wasn't weird enough, the owners of the house were an elderly couple that claimed they witnessed strange occurrences while living there, such as paranormal activity, and they claim to have even seen a creature known as the Skinwalker. The freakiest part? The couple disappeared and only their dog was found at their house. So, could this be true? Did the Skin Taker or another monster kidnap the couple? Looks like we'll never know. Unless someone wants to go investigate, then good luck. Coming in at our number 1 spot, we have the real life killer. So this theory surrounds the idea that the entire show is based on the real life killer David Parker Ray. David was a kidnapper, murderer, and torturer. Now, David had 3 different tactics that he would use to get to his victims. So, number 1, he would have a sad story to gain sympathy from them, and then the victims would allow them to enter their house. Number 2, he would persuade them with money, and 3, he would cut the phone lines. All of these tactics are used by different villains in the show. The villain, the Storm Goddess, gained entry into the Bags' home by crying and saying she lost her precious dog. The zombie film director entered their home with promises of a large sum of money if they let them shoot at the house. And Le Quack was shown to cut off the cable antenna and then entered the home claiming he was a TV repairman. Now, if those resemblances weren't freaky enough, David was said to disguise himself as different individuals. Meaning, he would disguise himself as different villains, just like how there are multiple villains in the show. Starting off this countdown, we have the Spirit of the Harvest Moon. This demon appears in the episode titled House of Discontent. It is a floating, white glowing human head with all black eyes and a black mouth. He basically casts a spell in their house which causes a bunch of strange things to happen. It all escalates and Courage, Eustace, and Muriel almost melt to death. Now, this character isn't just in the Courage the Cowardly Dog show. It is actually a villain in the Goosebumps series. It was featured in the book More Tales to Give You Goosebumps. In this book, every harvest moon, the spirit goes around trying to find a human to latch onto. Jenny was staying at a cabin with her friend Tyler when she suspects he is the spirit's new host. Eventually, Tyler's dog fights him off, only for the dog to become the next host of the spirit. Well, some people are convinced that that dog mentioned in the book is Courage. I mean, the dog did protect Jenny by fighting off the spirit, just like how in the show, Courage is always protecting Muriel from spirits and creatures. So somehow they could just be the same dog. We have the hole in the tooth. Lots of fans continuously wonder why and how Courage has a massive hole in one of his teeth. Since there's no definite answer out there, people have taken it upon themselves to come up with their own explanation for it. One theory says that the hole was caused by Eustace trying to kill Courage. In the show, we can see that Eustace does not have a liking for Courage and is often very abusive towards him. People theorize that one day he was just fed up and took a gun and shot Courage, but all it did was leave a hole in his tooth and not actually hurt him. Other people think that he tortures Courage by tying a rope to his tooth and hanging him up by it when he misbehaves. Lastly, other people think that it's a result of bad hygiene. Maybe it symbolizes how they can't really afford to take him to the vet and get him proper medical attention. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below why you think he has a hole in his tooth. In our 8th spot, we have the monsters. Ever notice in the show that Courage's owners hardly fear the villains? Courage can sense their evilness and is spooked by their appearances. But Eustace and Muriel remain clueless and they hardly get frightened. Well, it could just be that it's because Eustace and Muriel are not actually humans. They may also be monsters disguised as humans. Seriously, like, they've encountered some pretty terrifying creatures and they've been subject to torture, but it doesn't really freak them out that much. Almost as if it's normal to them, as if they aren't humans. Because if they were humans, then they definitely wouldn't act as cool as they do now. Like, I don't know about you, but I'd be freaking out if some random alien or weird type creature started visiting my house. But it's most likely that they're just old and senile. But the other theory is more fun. Making our way down the list at number 7, we have the simulation. Every day, poor Courage and his owners are subject to terrible events. Why is this? Well, there wouldn't be a show if there wasn't. But anyways, people think that they are actually living in a simulation. At the end of each day, it resets, and the same thing happens over and over again, just with slight variations, aka new villains. This theory was used to explain why some of the episodes don't line up, or they don't start where the previous one left off. It also explains how in one episode, Courage was shaved by Freaky Fred, and in the next episode, he just had all of his hair back. Or how Muriel can be possessed, and then the next time we see her, she acts like nothing happened. Or how Eustace and Muriel got turned into puppets, and the next episode, they were back in their human form. That's also why they are never shown to die. And if they do, then they would just be resurrected the next day when the simulation starts again. Making our way down the list at number 6, we have the Guardian Angel. This theory suggests that Muriel has sadly passed away and everything we see is from her living in limbo. Basically, limbo is the in-between of heaven and hell. So the theory starts by saying that one day she was struck and killed by a hit-and-run accident. I don't know how though, because there's barely anyone around where they live, but okay, let's just ignore that. Anyways, she is unaware that she has died and is now trapped in limbo. As a result, she goes on with her normal day. That's when she sees Courage as an abandoned puppy. Courage is actually there to help her fight off the evil spirits in limbo and help guide her to heaven. So in a way, he is her guardian angel, which is why we see him relentlessly protecting her. It also explains how dangerous things can happen to her, but she never dies. That's because she's already dead, so nothing can harm her. Only deter her from her final goal. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the abused dog. So I touched briefly on this in my last theory video, but basically I said that Courage is always scared. Now I know in the last episode we finally get to see Courage's parents through flashbacks, and we see that they are the same color as him. But it could just be that Courage is convinced that this is his natural normal color and his parents are the same color as him. Who knows? I mean, I don't know how much this theory holds up, but it's pretty creative, but also dark and sad. In our 4th spot, we have Area 51. The events that the couple go through on a daily are definitely not normal. How come they're constantly being visited and tormented by different creatures daily? Well, people have theorized that they may live or around Area 51. Yes, I know that the show states that they live in a made-up place called Nowhere, Kansas, but it could just be a fake name that they use when they actually live in Area 51. I mean, both seem to be located in a barren-type desert. Maybe the monsters that they encounter are from the creatures escaping Area 51. In the show, we have also seen numerous aliens. In one episode, they are visited by an alien brain creature with 3 large tentacles and 2 bulging eyes. This visitor lands his ship just outside their home. In another episode, we see a different spaceship land at their home, which reveals a mutated alien named Theo. It could just be that 1, these aliens are visiting to try and rescue their other alien friends from Area 51, or 2, these aliens have escaped Area 51 and have fled to the next nearest location, Eustace and Mariel's home. In our third spot, we have the Purgatory. This theory suggests that Courage is actually dead and is currently in Purgatory, where he has to be purified and absolved of his sins before he can go to heaven. Basically, Eustace's ongoing abuse to him is his punishment for some sort of crime he committed while being alive. Courage has to prove his worthiness in order to be sent to heaven. He does this by doing good deeds, like constantly protecting Muriel. Now let's look at the very last episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog, which is Season 4, Episode 13. Part 2 of the episode is titled Perfect. In this episode, Courage is visited by the Perfectionist. Basically, she teaches him how to be perfect and gets mad whenever he does something that's not perfect according to her standards. Well, the theory suggests that the Perfectionist was trying to make him perfect, as that's the last step in order for him to get to heaven. Moving on to number 2, we have the post-apocalyptic world. Now, this theory seems to have been applied to almost every show, but it actually works quite well for this one. Basically, people have created the theory that this show takes place after something wiped out most of humanity. As a result, there are only a few human and animal survivors. But because of a radiation leak, it caused most of the surviving humans and animals to mutate. This could explain why most of the animals shown can talk and have odd features. For example, in the episode titled Farmer Hunter, Farmer Hunted, we see a family of deers. The father is wearing glasses while the mother deer is wearing a bonnet. Then the father is shown to stand on his hind legs, talk, and is capable of firing a laser gun. Definitely a more advanced species. At one point in the episode, Eustace even rips off the deer's antlers and puts it on his head, and the deer didn't even flinch in pain. This further emphasizes that they are indeed a mutated species. In the same episode, we see a white tiger that also stands on his hind legs, talks, and can do front flips. Nobody tell Joe. And of course, in the episode, we see a talking giant grizzly bear with red eyes and sharp teeth. Then take a look at Courage himself. He's a pinkish purple dog. So the animals that did survive mutated to this extent. Now the theory goes on by saying that the monsters are mutated people, such as Elisa and Elsa are twins that got fused together. Other humans are seen with more extreme features like a large oval head, like how the King of Flan has a large oval head, or how Freaky Fred has long, rectangular, giant teeth. The humans that have survived either live in isolation, like the Bags, or they are driven to insanity from living in a post-apocalyptic world. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Murderer. Eustace is definitely not the nicest man out there. In fact, people have theorized that he not only wants Courage dead, but his innocent wife Muriel as well. I mean, in the episode we see that Muriel constantly gets put into dangerous situations, like being kidnapped or attacked by monsters, but her husband rarely does. This could be because he's the one orchestrating all of these attacks, hoping that one will eventually kill his wife. In the episode titled Cat's Motel, Eustace, Muriel, and Courage spend the night at a motel. Eustace ties Courage up outside and goes directly to sleep. Meanwhile, Muriel is taking a bath and gets attacked by a giant spider. How did he sleep through this while Courage is all the way outside hearing her? He even tries to wake him up and he doesn't succeed. Well, it could just be that it was his plan all along. Now, Eustace constantly calls Courage a stupid dog. Well, that's probably because Courage always interferes with his plans and ends up saving his wife before she is killed.